Hey everyone, today we're looking at the Pulsar Massive, which appears to be a Manley Massive Passive with a whole bunch of extra features that you can take advantage of. So let's check it out. So this is the Pulsar Massive, and I actually used to own a Manley Massive Passive years ago, and I owned it for a little over a year and ended up selling it, not because it wasn't an amazing piece of gear. It absolutely was. At the time, I just had some other gear needs that I really needed, so I ended up basically trading it for some other gear. And then a couple years later, I actually ended up working in a studio that had a Manley Massive Passive. So I have a lot of experience on the hardware. And the Massive Passive is not an EQ that you reach for when you want to do surgery. In fact, I would say this is one of the most broad stroke color EQs that's ever been made. So if you master using it, you can do some really amazing things. I would say the learning curve on using the Massive Passive is much greater than a typical EQ, and it definitely took me a while to figure out how to use it well. So one of the cool things about getting the plug-in version is you have this graphic EQ right above the Massive Passive. So it lets you know what's happening because this EQ responds very differently than traditional EQs when you start twisting the knobs, when you start changing the bandwidth. It's just a very unique EQ. So I think the two great advantages that you have with the plugin version is that you can see this graphical user interface. You can see what's happening as you do boosts and cuts. And also you have some great presets to start with, so you can kind of see what some other great engineers have done with this piece and some kind of settings that are general good starting places. So if you look at the middle section here in the Pulsar Massive, I can just take you through some of the extra features that you get. So first you have a power button, which is just a bypass button. Next you have this drive button, which you can add drive to the signal without adding volume. So that's a really cool feature. You have gain here, and it also has an auto gain function right here in the middle. You have low pass and you have high pass. And also right here you can change the transformer, which is going to give you a different character. There's transformer 1 and 2, and then you can turn the transformer off to get a more transparent sound. Lastly, one of the great features it has is you can change it from doing left-right to mid-side processing. So we have a few sources today that we're going to run through the Pulsar Massive, but I want to tell you, in my experience with the Manley Massive Passive, there's two things that really stood out to me about it. The massive bottom end that you can get from it, and secondly was the air that you can get from it. I'll share a quick story. The first time I got the Massive Passive in my original studio, I had another engineer friend with me, and we just started to play with it. And we had a mix. We were running a whole mix through it, and we boosted the 27K in this mix, and both of our jaws nearly hit the floor. We had never heard anything like that. We both agreed that there was just something magical happening up there in that air band. And so that's the two things that I remember it doing really well, is giving you some really thick lows and some really beautiful air that I don't think I can think of any other analog EQ that does exactly what the Massive Passive does in the air band. It's just a very unique sound, and it's very musical. So the first thing I want to run through the Massive today is a drum set. And as you can see, I've done some EQing already. And again, this is a very musical broad stroke EQ. So believe it or not, that's about as tight as you can get the bands. And they work really well together when you know how to use them. So let me play this drum set first for you dry, and then I'll pop in the Massive with this EQ curve that I dialed in. So that kick drum just comes alive with the Massive. Let me play it again and I'll pop it in and out. So first in bypass. So I added a little more top end. The auto gain function is in, and let me just do a couple more passes and I'll pop it in and out. So in the first band, it's just really giving the drum set more power. In that second band, I'm just kind of scooping out a little bit of boxiness, a little bit of mud. And then of course, on the last band, we're just boosting some clarity, boosting some air. And I think it really did something special with that drum kit. Next, I have a stereo bass track that I want to show you, and I'm going to actually use the graphical user interface this time to do boosting and cutting, and I'm just going to play around with it so you can kind of see how easy it is to tweak the settings just using the graphical user interface. Massive. So there you go. That's really fun to just dial those in right on the screen, and it's really easy to do. So I love that you can do that, or you can just turn the knobs, and it's kind of fun to experiment with both. Next, I have an orchestral piece that I want to show you the Massive on, and this shows you a couple things. You can do really big boosts with this without it getting out of hand, and it still sounds really sweet and really musical. So here's first without the Massive, and then I'll pop it in. Now with the Massive. Let me do another pass and I'll pop it in and out. So musical, and it just has that magic quality where it makes things sound more like a record. Here's a rock mix with the Pulsar Massive, and I'll start in bypass. And lastly, I have one more example of using it on the stereo bus. So here's first in bypass.
Stars are shining bright tonight. It's such a joy to be outside, and I promise you everything will be alright. The stars are shining bright tonight.
So there you have it, and there's so many more things that you could use the Massive on. I just had a few examples to show you today. Everything I shared with you today is completely my opinion, but Pulsar did give me a copy of this to try out, so I wanted to say thank you to Pulsar. And let me know what you think of this unit. Leave me a comment. I love reading the comments, and I try to respond to every single one. So if you got some value out of this video today, would you hit that like button? Also, subscribe to this channel. Hit that bell for notifications so that you can be notified when I put out new videos. I put them out every single week. And make yourself a cup of coffee and hang out on my channel for a little bit longer. YouTube recommends this video for you. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.